Welcome to the Wow Effect. This is where 6 and 7-figure women share the raw, unfiltered stories of how they built their empires. I'm your host, Mallory Steele. The room is ready. Let's get into it.
Okay, welcome to the Wow Effect podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Arlinda today. Thank you, Arlinda, so much for being here. And wondering if you can kick us off by sharing how you started your journey into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, first of all. I'm very excited to be part of this and just be part of the amazing group of women that you've already interviewed who have been super inspiring as well. So in terms of my journey to entrepreneurship, I would say it's almost as if it was just in my DNA. I know that sounds so cheesy, but I've been part of a family business ecosystem since I was a child. My family has owned restaurants and we're going on 50 years.
Ooh,
So
that's huge.
this year is the 50th year of the brand. And so that has been something that I watched growing up. My first business was in university where I saw that my roommates didn't want to go sell their textbooks. So I said, let me sell your textbooks and I'll do it for a profit. And people love that convenience. So, that was my first miniature foray, but really in terms of my official business, that was after I graduated university. I started tutoring. Just in the interim was my plan. That was sort of in between goals and such. But what I started to see were prevailing patterns amongst my students. And so I was tutoring courses in the high school realm. So primarily like calculus, physics, chemistry. But the areas of need that I kept seeing were foundational skill gaps that needed to be addressed in order to build on that and create success in the upper level years. So I started getting frustrated with that, and I thought there has to be a solution. And so my goal, and something we have accomplished, is we're the category leader in Canada for building essentially taking the private school model of one-on-one learning and blending it with the tutoring model. And what that really means is that we create individualized plans for every student that supersede not just curriculum, but also what those standard expectations are of what learning is, because learning is not just, something that comes from doing textbook work. There's much more involved, right? Even though textbook work is very important. So that was my first business, Scholarly Elite Tutoring. We offer tutoring to students all across Canada, both in person and virtually. And that has actually led to my second business, Ira Publishing, because we created so much internal content. A big part of our foundational concept mastery program, which was built heavily on not just the Ontario curriculum, but also best practices, was something that the teachers that work in our program were asking us if they can use in their own classrooms. And we thought, well, this is a solution to a problem that exists. So let's take this much larger than just here locally and in Canada. So that has led to the launch of our educational materials publishing company, Ira Publishing, as I said. And that provides solutions in French and English for educators to make learning accessible for their students, and also make the creation and provision of learning materials much more easy for teachers, because teachers are very busy. They've got a lot on their plate, and this allows them to access that learning material much more effectively.
I love it. This is why you and I get along so well. You're such a go-getter, and having that upbringing with your family, it's such a blessing. And I didn't realize how much of a blessing it was until recently too, until you take the time to actually think back on your childhood and what we were raised with. So
right. Yeah, they're saying that it is one of the determinants of success one of the many is also, family dynamics and what that looks like for childhood. So there's so many important pieces, and I totally agree. Once you start looking back on it, you're like, wow, I should never complain about anything. It's great.
Right. But you're juggling a couple of businesses now, and the whole journey, it's been super easy, right? Like it's been seamless, no challenges at all.
Nothing. It's all great, you know? You never have to work 90 hours a week. It's not a big deal.
But in seriousness, there are, a lot of women probably listening to this who hit a challenge and they think they're the only ones. Did you ever feel like that in your journey, and anything come to mind?
That's a really interesting question. I think entrepreneurship can be a little isolating sometimes, especially when you're in the thick of it and you're trying to scale and you're building something that you truly believe in. And sometimes you feel like that mad scientist that's like, no one understands me, But I've been very blessed to live in a community, that as well is incredibly supportive of entrepreneurs. And in my early days, much more than now, actually, which I've been thinking lately, I should endeavor out more in this cold. But I actually was very blessed, and I think this is my recommendation to other entrepreneurs, is to be in entrepreneurial spaces and meet other people, so that feeling of being alone doesn't engulf you and doesn't preoccupy your mind. And because you learn so much from other people, because most of the other entrepreneurs have had very similar problems. Business, while each business, of course, is unique, I think there are frameworks that work, and other people have already adopted them. So that's been my experience, is that, while it can be somewhat isolating at times, there are communities out there where you can really feel support and understand that you are part of this collective of people who are trying to make the world a different place, hopefully a better place, right? Through their ideas, which is quite inspiring as well.
So good. So you're juggling a couple of companies. I've heard some women share that, it's too much. I'm starting 3 different things. I'm getting pulled everywhere. I don't know where to prioritize or focus my attention. I think I should just get rid of the first one and just focus on this one. What are your thoughts around that, or how do you juggle more than one at the same time?
I think it's almost like the notion of portfolio diversification in investment. Diversity is incredibly positive. And so while I don't think you can give your full attention to each one at the same time, because that just splits your attention. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit oxymoronic, but my recommendation is to, as much as possible, split your day into segments where you have a singular focus. And so it is possible as well to delegate. And I think that's a really key piece that took me a long time to learn. You talk about those difficulties that arise as you build a business. And I think this is true of anyone who's building something. You become so attached to your vision and your hopes and dreams for what it's going to become. And it's very easy to think, that mentality of like, it's just me against the world, right? But in my experience, building out my team has been one of the most gratifying parts of this journey. I get to work with the most incredible people, and that's, I think, ultimately how you can scale, how you can build multiple businesses at once. To do it all yourself, I commend the person that tries, but it becomes increasingly difficult as you're scaling, because to do something, at large, unless your business is so fully automated, and especially on the service side, that can be a little bit more difficult, because you need to have people that answer the phones and speak with clients and all of those pieces, and also manage employees and things like that. It becomes increasingly difficult. So that's my recommendation, is to build out your team and understand that leveraging your profits to do so ultimately will garner more profit. Because at the end of the day, not only are those people bringing on their amazing skill sets that are perhaps better than yours, and hopefully better than yours, right? Like you want to hire people where every day they're coming in with ideas, because their granular understanding of the work is now much higher than yours, because they're in the trenches. They're the ones doing it, right? So when you've hired people that are leaders, are A players, it makes a big difference. And I think that's really the key. I also think a lot to Shonda Rhimes of Grey's Anatomy fame and all these amazing shows, Shondaland. She had a commencement speech where she talks about how, when she's doing amazingly at one thing, she's failing at another thing. And you have to reconcile with that, right? Like if you are spending 2 hours focusing on one business, then ultimately you are ignoring your other business. So in order to mitigate the effects of that, you have to place people there so that business is still running successfully. Otherwise, you can't do it effectively, in my mind, without having just incredible people on your side, because nothing is built alone, right? Nothing great, anyways, in my mind.
Curious of your perspective on the hiring order or priority of hiring. Who do you need first? And I know it's different for each company based on the skill sets and whatever, but I would find it difficult. Like I've always had like a go-to one person, like my right hand. And I don't know if I could do the alternative. Like I've heard of other women who have multiples, and I'm like, I don't know. I think I would drown in trying to be a leader to so many different people at the same time instead of having my one person. But maybe what are your thoughts around that?
My thoughts are that I did it wrong initially,
Okay.
and I did the multiple people piece. And I do agree with you. I think having an operator is incredibly important. The person I have in place as our director of education right now, she is, I could talk about her all day and cry about it. She's the most incredible human being, and she runs everything so flawlessly. And without her, I've literally said, I don't know how my life would run, which perhaps I shouldn't rely so heavily on just one person. But, I do think that it's crucial that you have someone who is managing others, because then you get pulled into a million different discussions every day that are micro discussions that are not necessarily driving the vision forward. And my notion of being a CEO, which when you're the founder, I don't love that term necessarily, because you're doing so many different things, but is really, you are the strategy side of the business. You need to be thinking 3 years ahead. You need to be looking at trends, not so that you can follow trends, but so that you can understand what is the current zeitgeist, where are the paradigm shifts happening, how can we think ahead and make sure that we're prepared, right? So yeah, I'm a big fan of having a right hand, but I think that right hand needs to have the ability to hire, bring on other people as necessary, and they need to understand your long-term strategic plan as well, because otherwise that misalignment can be very jarring.
I love that you went down the strategy road, because I think as women, men too, but as you scale and you go through that transition from self-employed to business owner, it's almost like they go through a season of guilt of delegating the pieces off so they can focus on strategy. And they're like, really? I get to focus on strategy? Like that's the role I play?
It's interesting. And, I think part of it too, like I'll speak for myself in terms of my journey. I was, like I said, initially on the tutoring side, and I loved it. And I loved working with students, and I loved seeing their successes, especially as we were implementing our content and our program and really seeing how that affected their long-term success. And I stayed on the tutoring side probably too long. It actually took an injury for me to take a step back and really evaluate, where is my time most effectively used, because I physically couldn't go and work with the students anymore at the time. And so that forced me into that delegation mode. So yeah, I do think that it's difficult, but hopefully you don't wait until an injury forces you to do something like that. And I think that's really key when you have, like, a lot of people talk about busyness as being a form of laziness because it's just this notion of indiscriminate action, right? Like you're just doing everything all the time to try to, fuel the fire here and keep the fire from extending over there. And instead of putting out fires, you want to have a fire safety plan in advance, right? And hope that you don't, even though you know that different issues might arise, you want to have systems in place. And I think that's the key piece that takes someone into that ability to scale, because systems are everything. Like if my business, if I wasn't here, my business could still run, and that's taken time to build. But I actually wish that I had done that somewhat more preemptively instead of as a reactive piece. And so in my second business, that's something that we've been very careful about doing is building systems first, as opposed to doing it the other way around. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to market and you shouldn't iterate, because of course the market also helps you determine what needs to get done. But there are some key pieces on the back end, customer relationship management pieces and administrative, accounting, all of those ideally are mostly in place as you launch something. So that's my recommendation too. Although
Yes.
I probably digressed so intensely from your question, I apologize.
No. I love that you shared all of that. I say all the time, like, come up with your hit by the bus list that you can delegate out before you actually get hit by the bus. Like none of us want the actual accident, but we usually don't prioritize until we have the accident, right?
Yeah.
And then, so I love that you're sharing how you're building your second business differently too.
And because it's also such a different client vertical, and not so different because I think, ultimately we're humans and the things that drive us are at our core somewhat elementary, right? But I do think it's important to segment your audience and understand your unique selling proposition and all those pieces in advance. And yes, certain things might come up as you go along the way, and your assumptions might sometimes be wrong, which is totally okay. It's about being open and having that adaptability quotient in place where you're open to feedback and you're open to pivoting as necessary. But if you don't understand your consumer, it makes it very difficult to do so. And if you're not willing to listen to your consumer, it makes it almost impossible, because they help determine the trajectory of your business to some degree. And yeah.
So good. I hear so many people who they get stuck on the product over the problem, right? And if we get obsessed with the problem with the person, then the solution can change or can evolve, or it can be like we're not so stuck on this thing and jamming it down whoever is going to buy it in reverse.
Exactly. And I think every business, there are, of course, businesses that don't necessarily solve a problem and they're more hope and aspirational based, which is fine too. I think if that's what someone wants to do, that's great. I love having solutions to people's problems, right? And not everybody has the same problem, or at very least they're not framing it the same way. I think it's important, like I said, to split your audience into verticals, and so that you can determine what are the benefits that they're looking for and back that up with your features, back that up with your understanding of how your product is unique, how it's a leader, how it's the first in its category, right? Because people understand that on some subconscious level, perhaps, that they have a problem, but sometimes it also helps for you to help them define it. Right? And that can lead to building that story out, building how you are the best solution for their issue.
100%. What are they saying and what are they not saying too?
Exactly. And again, like, you can be wrong sometimes. I went into the tutoring space thinking that parents cared exclusively about marks. I came from a family where marks were, heavily guarded, we could say, very important. And I thought that's all parents would care about. And over time, having really in-depth discussions, because in the beginning you're doing it yourself to some degree, like having these discussions with moms, primarily moms, although we do see some dads, which is great too. But having these in-depth discussions about emotions and how that's something that they were hoping to address, was that their child wasn't feeling confident, and that their child, they're worried about how that might affect their child long term. And how, for example, like literacy, which is such a crucial skill because it's ultimately a life skill, and the ability to communicate, whether it's through word or through written word, are so essential to long-term success.
Even in an AI world.
Oh yeah, and I think even more so in an AR world, because the roles that are going to be human facing still require having those skill sets. And the limits of your language are the limits of your world at the end of the day, right? Like, I mean, again, we're talking to two people who love who love these, both of us I know love these pieces, but I really do believe that students and anyone being able to acquire those skills are going to succeed more effectively down the line. And so, you know, those were my assumptions going in, and I was pleasantly surprised to see, like, wow, you know, the parents also care about this. And so we did have to pivot a lot of our marketing and our frameworks around, well, how can we foster this? How can we, you know, be the leader in this industry in that way? So, and again, we're doing that every day. It's not something that's just done. You're constantly needing to iterate, as you know, in business. And I think it's about having the focus to do that.
So good.
Quick pause for a second. If you're loving conversations like this is exactly the kind of energy we build inside the WOW Collective. It's a community of women growing serious businesses and doing it together. Now let's get back to the conversation.
Arlinda, were there any leadership skills that you know, as you developed your different teams, were there leadership skills that you came natural to you, and were there leadership skills that you had to develop?
I love yelling at people. No, I'm just kidding. Although I'm happy to yell at people who deserve it, not in my teams, just in public when necessary. But
remind me to take you out.
Please, anytime. You know, that's interesting. I don't know that I've thought about that necessarily before, but I would say that the Lord gave me the gift of the gab. And so I think in my mind, caring about the people that I work with, like just genuinely, truly wanting them to succeed, wanting them to excel beyond even the framework that I've created here, you know, hoping that they can achieve their long-term goals and being sort of just a stepping stone in that way. I think that's been something that has really lended itself to internal success in the business. You know, if someone came to one of our meetings, they would think, who are these? Like, why are they just gabbing away and having a grand old time? But I really do think that human component is incredibly important. So for me, that's something that has worked in my favor. And perhaps what I need to work on is reeling that in a little bit sometimes, and, you know, ensuring that we're not just having a fun gab session and really getting things done. But at the end of the day, when you have people who care about what you're doing and believe in what you're doing, you don't need to provide as much micromanagement and guidance as you would. And this is something I've noticed also. We've had lots of interns over the years. We had, as we've been building out the publishing company as well, we've had a lot of digital technology interns just helping us digitize everything and all of that. And actually, people like to say that because we had a partnership with UFT, the University of Toronto, and we had so many incredible people come through there, and a lot of our admin staff now actually were interns initially and brought on for long-term work. And I think something that I noticed was, because those folks that were coming in were typically there for 4 months at a time, it's not the same as when you have sort of that core team that you're building that really are there for the long-term success of a product or the long-term success of the business. And so you do sort of see that dichotomy start to build, where team building still happens, but of course, because it's so short term, you don't get to build as deep of a connection. And I think at our core, we're human, and people have aspirations and desires and things. And if you don't address those and treat them as if they're important, because they are important, it ultimately leads to suffering in your business. So that's, I think, to answer your question.
You shared so much good in there, and I didn't want to throw off your train of thought, but I want to back it up for a second, because you shared that you were given the gift of the gab. But what I find interesting is, you're a very good conversationalist. You know how to ask the right questions. You know how to pick up on social cues. It's not like you're talking at. When you say you have the gift of the gab, I've never once thought you just talk at, or talk like you engage and you ask good questions.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. It's taking work. And actually, I think that's the piece that I've had to work on, is that if you were to just leave me, I could do a 20-hour dialogue every day, right? But I've had to work on saying, reel it in a little bit, and engage more meaningfully, which I think has led to just building amazing relationships as well. Like people like yourself, who there's so much more to learn from other people than just you going on a diatribe about your own thoughts, because everybody has something valuable to share. It's just about helping other people sometimes open up about what it is that they care about. And
it takes a good level of awareness to be aware of that. And I recently ran an experiment, because there's a couple of people I know who they could talk forever, but I think it's more from a place of, I want to provide value, and they've never been trained of how to provide value in the form of asking the questions, I think. And a couple of weeks ago, I ran an experiment with somebody. I was with them for 5 hours straight, and I timed it to see how at what hour are they going to ask a question. After 5 hours, not one single question.
Oh my God.
That's fascinating. But you could tell they kept trying to add value of just, let me tell you what this thing I did, and this thing, and this thing, and you could do this, and you could do this, and there's this thing. And I was like, this is interesting. Somebody taught this person that a good conversation means tell the other person as much as you possibly can.
Right. And I think that conversational skills are actually something that will become increasingly important. Like years ago, when the business was first starting, we used to run emotional intelligence workshops. And that was one of the key pieces we would talk about with the students, who were primarily ages, I want to say 9 to 12. So they were quite young. And one student in particular, I remember coming up and basically saying, well, why are you not asking us to basically do a monologue? Instead, you're telling us to ask questions. And we had it as a game-based piece, where basically we would give one student like a profession, basically, like you're a firefighter, and the other person has to talk to you for 2 minutes and try to figure out, without asking you specifically what your job is, what is it that you do? And so asking questions like, well, what does your morning routine look like? And what do you need to prepare for your work, and things of that nature, and asking those follow-up questions. And I think that's a skill that can be taught. Some folks are naturally skilled, but I actually think back to something that my mom instilled in me, which is, at the time that I started serving at our restaurant, I was incredibly shy, right? Which is like crazy to imagine now, but I was incredibly shy. I was maybe 13 years old. And she said, the more you practice having conversations with people, it's just going to become like second nature to you. And I credit that for, not being scared to speak now, because once you've had thousands of conversations, you realize that the other person is not scary. And actually the other person is someone to learn from. And if you don't ask questions, you're missing out on this golden opportunity, right? Which is actually why I find doing podcasts difficult in some senses, because I find that it is that more of a one-sided conversation. Like, I'd love to dive into your side now. Be like, we're done talking about you. Let's do
You can host one too. That's why I love playing host. It's so easy. I get to ask all the questions and hear the stories.
Right? It's awesome. Yeah. So I do think it's important, and it's a skill that's going to become increasingly important. I wish that it was taught explicitly in schools. And maybe it will be, right? Like as politics shift and things shift, perhaps that's going to be something that's going to become more important. I just hope we don't wait until there's a crisis, a communication crisis, for us to address it, which tends to be sort of how things go. It tends to be more reactive, similar to what we saw with literacy here in Ontario. So anyways, yeah, that's the gist of what I'm trying to say.
You're triggering a thought for me, because when I was younger, my sister was the quieter one. She was shyer, and I think we were both shy, but she was more shy. So I took the role of speaking on her behalf. And it wasn't until, I don't know how long I did this for, because it wasn't until my early 20s that someone pointed out to me, somebody asked somebody else a question and I jumped in to answer for them. And they go, I can answer for myself. I was like, how long have I been doing that? I don't know.
You became her lawyer, essentially. Like, you know what, Mom and Dad, please don't speak to my client that way.
Yeah, I would interpret for her. This sign language means this. This is what you're saying. But I don't know how many other people I ended up crossing that over and doing it for, to fill that in for other people. So interesting.
And I'm sure there are people that do appreciate it too. Like sometimes, like I said, sometimes in public you just got to yell at people, and that's okay. Right? No, I'm kidding. I'm not advocating for that. Let's have less anger.
For the right reasons, right?
For the right reasons, right? But yeah, it's those learned patterns can be hard to unlearn sometimes, for sure.
Or be at least someone to make us aware of them. Like if we're not even aware of them, we can't even address them.
Yes. Yeah.
So cool. I was hoping you'd go down the emotional intelligence path. How would you transfer that over to, other women in business? The things that maybe their skill sets that you've seen in the training of your students, in tutoring, maybe other women in business could benefit from something. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's
maybe around failure or resilience.
Yeah, and I do believe it comes back to that adaptability quotient and this notion that we see failure as a data point. And hope that it doesn't become something demoralizing, right? I think there's like a 3-pronged approach to my answer. So I'll start with saying, prior to building anything, I do think, and even as you're building it, I think it's important to have communication skills. And again, those are things that can be acquired. It doesn't mean that, it's not something you can learn. My number one piece that I make all of our sales team watch is the negotiation class from the lead FBI negotiator, whose name is escaping me right now, of course. But
Chris Voss? Is it Chris Voss?
Yes, Chris Voss on Masterclass. And now he has a second class on there as well. Because not only I'm not saying that you need to have this sort of antagonistic approach to every conversation, but I think understanding how people communicate most effectively makes all the difference in business, in sales, in everything, even right down to marketing. Because understanding what's important to other people often requires us to have a willingness to learn from them, right? So I would argue that, especially if you're in a business that requires sales, which I think is all business, really. I mean, not everything requires one-to-one direct sales like this, but even a page of copy on a website is a sales vehicle. So understanding what matters to other people, understanding how we use story, because story can trump everything at the end of the day. It is so crucial that we understand what are the constraints that people are suffering in their life, like what are the constraints and what are the opportunities, and how we can navigate that from a storytelling perspective. People want to hear success stories. They want to hear hope. And I think that's crucial when you're building out your marketing, when you're building out your sales sequence, right? So that's the one piece. The other piece is also just having the ability to communicate internally, both face-to-face and via messages. Something I've learned over the years is everybody loves to skim. People are not doing like an in-depth essay level reading of every email that you send. So clarity is so key. And there's this term, not a term, but like a phrase, I think one of the great American writers, he wrote his wife a letter, and he wrote, I didn't have the time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one.
I love that. That's so good.
Right, because it's so much easier to just belabor the point and
Yes.
go on and on, but to be to have a full understanding of exactly what you want to say and communicate that in a way that the other person is receiving is so critical. So those are the first two pieces. And then, like you said, around this notion of failure, I think being able to communicate with oneself and have a groundedness around, I'll have an internal locus of control, as they like to say in psychology, right? To really understand that like the things happening in your environment, while sometimes they're out of your control, should not dictate how you feel inside. So I think actually having that internal dialogue of, okay, things are all right. Everything's going to work out. I just have to put my best foot forward and continue down a data-driven path and learn as much as possible. So I think those are the three key pieces. You have your external communication, internal communication within the business, as well as your internal communication with yourself.
So this is so good, and you've triggered two thoughts for me. Okay. And I didn't want to interrupt because you're like sharing so much gold here. So I'm going to share my two thoughts, and then you take it and run with whichever direction you want to go with this. But the one thought is, I hear so many women who have built a business that can run without them, but they haven't figured out how to have it grow without them. And then on the other side of that, the sales team that you talked about, that's kind of the last piece they let go of because they have a really hard time finding someone they can trust to, like represent them and their brand and handle the sales piece. So it kind of goes together, but it could be two separate runways.
Yeah. I think scaling is a very interesting skill set, and why I love talking to you, because you have so much knowledge in this space. And I think people would be best suited to listen to everything you have to say because you've done it so many times and so well. I think scaling ultimately requires that foundation of the business to be incredibly sound. As you scale operations, all the cracks start coming through, and you realize that while not every problem might need a system, because sometimes it truly is just a 1 in a million problem. But once a problem does arrive, asking ourselves, what are the systems that are necessary to reduce the effects of this issue? And trying to have that in place. And like I said previously, doesn't necessarily mean that you've mapped out everything perfectly and that nothing changes. There has to be an openness to seeing what happens along the way. And I think a lot of strategic thinking can be very high level, whereas a lot of issues that take place in a business can actually be something on the ground level and that need to be addressed, with sometimes just a simple fix, sometimes a more complex set of solutions. But yeah, I do think that that's crucial. If you are scaling, you have to address that piece. And forgive me because now the second part of your question is escaping.
That's okay. It was just kind of around sales in general, that they figure out how to set up a business that can run without them. They haven't figured out how to have it grow without them. Sometimes that may mean the team that they have in place, or just curious to your thoughts around that.
While I do think that most skills are teachable, I think that some people have a natural proclivity for sales. And so the hiring is very important. And then also hiring people who are willing to learn, because your sales script for your business might not be exactly the same as my sales script for my business. So someone who comes in from the auto industry, for example, and might come in and try to sell a certain way, well, they're selling to a different subset of people, right? Who have different desires, different aspirations, etc. So it is important that someone is willing to do the sales scripts that are in place and really take on the culture of the company that you're building. Because that, I think that's a big part of sales as well, is also what are those core values? Like for us, integrity is crucial. We are very big on telling families whether we're the right fit for them or not. Sometimes, if the case is that a student is better suited to a different service, I would rather they go to that service than us beginning a process that's not the right fit for them, right? So I think core values are important for people who are stressed about releasing that piece, which I get it, because I was there too, right? You think, again, you have this notion that like only I can do it, and and it's a fallacy that we tell ourselves, right? Because like I've had people and do have people on my sales team that are way better at selling than I am. And part of it also is that they're not as emotionally connected to the building of the business. And so having that detachment might be helpful. So those are my key pieces when I have discussed this on a few occasions with people who are looking to, release that part of their business to someone else, making sure that the people you're hiring, have integrity, have not similar values necessarily, just on a human level, but also what they believe is right and wrong from a business perspective. And making sure that once they're in place, you are providing them with opportunities to practice as well. So different forms of learning, that instructional design also matters when you're teaching someone how to do something within your business. So something to think about more granularly, I think, is what are the sequences in your business? What are the discussions in a sales conversation that lead to you saying certain things, and how are they being said? Like there's, again, I could bore you all day with my opinions on this, but yeah,
it definitely doesn't bore me, but I know we could talk about this all day. I love it.
And just also making sure that they have the knowledge necessary, right? Because someone might come into this industry and think, well, I had a child go through school, so I have a sense of exactly what it is that a child needs, but your child might be completely different from someone else's child. And so understanding, not just having empathy for other people, but also what are the foundational pieces that really need to be understood in order to address someone's issues correctly, basically.
Yeah, so good. So we're in 2026. What are your goals for the year? What's next for you? I think every business has you can call it a problem or a challenge, a current problem or challenge, and a next problem or challenge. And if we don't have any of those, it's because we're not doing anything. What's your next thing you're looking forward to or excited about?
Well, that's a really good question. There are a few key pieces. One, I think I've started to think of just goals in terms of health and wealth and making sure that they're both being addressed. And so we'll start on the wealth side. It's just because we're talking about business. You don't want to hear about my workout routine. But basically, I would say long-term goals as the guiding posts for my short-term goals. So really our long-term goals is to take our publishing business international. Because we do publish in French and English, there's lots of markets that we can enter. But as I've said earlier, I think ensuring that our foundations are in place first and foremost are crucial, because once that starts to take place, it becomes much more difficult to reel it in. So that's my primary piece for this year, is focusing on the publishing side a little bit more heavily, and ensuring that while that's being done, everything is still being properly completed on the tutoring business, in the tutoring business. And also just making sure that we are iterating in both senses. Because at the end of the day, if we're not keeping up with what's happening in the world, then we're not addressing the needs of our clients, whether it's parents on the tutoring side or whether it's larger organizations like school boards and private schools and teachers, and right, like, so understanding those pieces, I think, is going to be crucial for us in 2026, and yeah, hopefully scaling internationally. That's
exciting. I love it. Okay, we're almost coming to our time, but I do want to ask you, Arlinda, if you were to go back in time to your younger self, your younger entrepreneurial self, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
That's a great question. I think instead of trying to be an operator, look at being more strategic. How can things be propelled forward with knowledge as opposed to just action? And I do believe that learning must lead to action, or else it's a moot point. But first and foremost, you have to have the learning, right? So instead of trying to learn everything along the way, the hard way, doing it all yourself, really invest in learning more about business frameworks, understanding what works from a marketing perspective, a sales perspective, etc., instead of doing that in post. I think that would have made my journey much easier. And also, and this is something that I've encountered with so many other female entrepreneurs, is taking time for yourself as well. Like there was a period of time, an extended period of time, where I was working on the business 90 hours a week, and I don't recommend it. It's, eventually it does lead to burnout. And of course, that's a learning step as well. But to avoid that, I think having a very strong sense of understanding that with the correct inputs, you will get where you need to go. And it doesn't require you sacrificing your health in order to achieve your goals. So I think those are the two key pieces, is like learn strategy much more effectively and fast and prior to implementing. And like I said, constantly be seeking feedback and constantly be making your product the best it can be, but also taking care of yourself, I think, is so crucial and ultimately the real key to long-term success, because it's not a sustainable strategy otherwise. And it's important to care for yourself, otherwise you can't care for anyone else.
I was going to say, thank you for sharing that, because you are your biggest asset in your business. And if we don't take care of ourselves, then, I mean, yes, we will ultimately want to build businesses that will run and build without us and grow without us, but we are the drivers and the visionaries and the strategic ones behind it. So yeah, I'm really glad you shared that. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have asked you? Any final thoughts or words of wisdom for these women who are building, maybe the first generation in their family, building a business?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I feel like you asked so many incredible questions and we covered so much. I just think in terms of other women, other people in general, there's that phrase, everything is figure outable, yes. Right? No matter what the obstacle is, there is a framework and a solution, most likely that's been implemented previously. And that's not to say that you should, take someone else's business model and copy it exactly. Because if you do have a truly unique selling proposition, your business systems should be to some degree unique, right? But like we were saying in the beginning, you're not alone. There are other people out there who are going through this same journey, and they're likely in your vicinity. And it's important to not isolate yourself and to become sort of that global member of your community for your own benefit, because ultimately learning from others is going to help us achieve what we want to achieve. So
Mhm.
being open to that and being open to really having a sense of not just who you are, who your business is, but also what it is that you're solving in the world and the impact that it makes. I think all of those pieces are really crucial.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me on the Wow Effect podcast. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
If this conversation sparked something for you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. This is the Wow Effect. See you next time.